All right, welcome to PolitiTalks. We've got Neil, Zach, and our new guy, Kurt, or Four. He likes to go by either or of them on our Discord channel. This week's episode is drug testing and how that relates to getting government assistance. I guess we'll start off with everybody's viewpoint on that. So, Kurt, you're the new guy.
Well, I think that we do need to drug test for people to receive the assistance because, I mean, for me, I work, my money gets taken out of my checks to go towards government programs. I got to be drug tested for work. They should be drug tested to receive assistance.
Okay.
It's pretty straightforward. I like the viewpoint there. Personally, I'm of the same boat in that respect, in that I think you should be drug tested to receive welfare. I might maybe be a little more lenient on what drugs we would consider. Considering I live in California now, my company does not care that I work for. Granted, I think I work for a pretty liberal company, but they don't care if you pop positive for marijuana.
I mean, if marijuana is legal in your state, that's cool then,
Yeah, but I've worked for other companies here in the same state when marijuana was legal, and they would still fire you for it if you tested positive for it because it was a company policy. But I think when you're looking at it at a state level, you kind of have to just go with what's legal there. And that I think that we can be a little lenient on that side of things. But I think there's other things where we should probably be a little more strict in giving that away. I understand that there may be people who have addictions. So I think there's probably some programs that they need to be involved in and things like that to get the right solution. But I also think that you should have a job or some sort of a work requirement, even if that's voluntary work where you're just, hey, I'm going to show up to a community center and volunteer, something that you're doing to better your environment or community, whether that be picking up trash on the side of the road. I think it's Malaysia has a work requirement where everybody that wants welfare has a guaranteed job. It is working on the side of the road, helping build roads and clean up trash in their areas. It is hard, back-breaking labor for a bare minimum amount of money that basically helps them get by. And most people don't stay on that system for very long. It's basically a backup guaranteed job that ensures that everybody has a job no matter what, doing something to improve their community. But it is rough work. And I also understand there's some people who just can't work, or at least can't do that back-breaking work. And I understand those limitations are there. But here in the US, I think we can always find something for people to do. There's always a program that's lacking in volunteers. There's always trash blowing around out here in the desert. There's always something going on that could use some improvement or use another body to provide work to people, even if it's just to cover a bare minimum basic essentials within the case of welfare. So there you go.
Neil?
So I want to ask some clarifying questions.
Yes, ask away. Let's go.
When we say welfare,
that's a good question.
What program comes to mind for you? The reason I'm asking
Food
is
stamps.
because welfare
food
covers TANF, which is cash assistance, SNAP, which is food assistance, and
Yep.
Medicaid, which is health insurance.
Mhm.
So specifically, which
food stamps, and then
Food
what's
stamps.
the rent assistance program?
TANF, temporary need for family, temporary aid for needy families, and cash assistance.
Well,
I believe
No,
TANF
that's not the
and
word. There's
food stamps.
certain designations for rental properties that are for
That's Section 8.
Section 8. And I don't know how you apply for Section 8 as an end user, not as the
You-
landlord.
You apply through the whatever your housing authority website is for your local
Okay.
municipality.
I think both. I think Section 8 because that's housing, and then SNAP, which is food. Those two should have job and drug testing requirements.
Okay, so Zach
Medicaid.
is
I understand, like Medicaid, people have drug addictions and they need healthcare because of that. They need to get into a program and things like that. I understand people aren't necessarily going to meet all the requirements for that, or they may not be able to work and they need Medicaid because they can't work. They need health insurance, that kind of a thing. That's a little different. So yes. So does that answer your question? I think maybe
it doesn't answer the TANF one, which is again cash aid, cash assistance.
Cash assistance,
fell
just
under
straight up
housing,
cash.
did not.
Yes, you can get just cash
Mhm.
if you qualify. It's called TANF, and federal level is called TANF. We call it CalWorks in
Okay.
California, but the federal level is called TANF, temporary aid for needy families. You can get money to pay your rent, to buy things food stamps do not, right? SNAP does not cover toiletries, does not cover toothpaste, toothbrushes, shampoo. You cannot buy those with SNAP, supplemental nutrition aid. That has to go solely for food. So anything you need to buy at the grocery store that's not edible, you get cash for. That's also a different aid, but again, it's for families, so a single adult isn't going to get on there. A pregnant female can, but a single adult's not going to get that because it's for families specifically. But again, it's cash assistance. What about for that? So I want to. That's why I want to clarify. Like,
You have to raise your hand, Kurt. We're not in school. Just start talking.
That's a good question. I don't know that I have a direct answer. I'm definitely talking over you. I don't know that I have a direct answer on that one because that's not one that I've looked into and or studied extensively. I would probably put drug testing as job requirement. No, since it's a family scenario, I understand you can't necessarily, it might be more cost effective for you to stay home and watch your kids than to pay to put your kids into childcare and then go work a minimum wage job. So
there's also the single mother who can't leave to go for work, who might be on drugs or something, that they do need the assistance because there's no other income to the house.
Then we need to be getting off drugs because we should be paying for drugs.
Yeah.
I don't know. I struggle with the idea of straight cash.
But it's a thing and has been for a while.
I know, but that
In
really
PA,
bothers
it's not
me
straight
now that I
cash.
hear
You
about
actually get a card that's loaded.
Okay. Still.
All right, so Neil, your viewpoint?
So my viewpoint, I'm just going to start there. I think it's stupid. I don't understand drug testing. I think it's a stupid thing.
Why?
And so let me first, before I just counterpoint everyone else's, I'm just going to go with my viewpoint and just go there. I'm going to appeal to your conservative nature because conservatives tend to be fiscally conservative, which means they like money and hate government waste.
True.
So if you hate government waste, you should hate drug testing for any type of aid. You know why?
Why?
Cost
You waste
money.
an insane amount of money. So what 13 states, there's a thinkprogress.org. The thing found what 13 states discovered after spending hundreds of thousands of drug testing on the poor. So they required drug testing for people that were applying for TANF, the cash assistance. Okay. They spent more than $200,000 on that. So it was a total $201,231, and they saved. I want to say it was $4,000 in what they spent. So you spend $200,000, you save $4,000. Florida also did this. Florida was the most. Go ahead.
So you're saying that they spent $200,000 drug testing people, and they only had enough positives that came back that they didn't spend $4,000 in assistance.
Correct.
Okay, so you're supposing the idea that the drug testing doesn't matter because people aren't on drugs, not because there is a requirement in place, people are therefore not taking the drugs because they know that they're going to test positive and therefore not qualify for their assistance. And
so a question for you, and this is going to be a side question. I don't mean to personally. You don't have to answer. Have you ever done drugs?
Nope.
So you've never taken a drug test on drugs?
I have never taken a drug test on drugs. I've taken many a drug tests, but
of course you
have. They're not hard to pass. So let's throw that out there. This is obviously before I worked where I work now, but yeah, because where I work now, it doesn't require a drug test, which is also funny. Not all jobs require drug tests.
Right.
So
and they none of them should.
If you're in a driving position, it needs to.
The equation of I have to
Sector?
drug test, so everyone should is kind of a fallacy because not everyone has to drug test to begin with. But specifically, so scrolling down on the website again, Alabama. Let me scroll back up here so I can see how much they spent. And why does it want to keep jumping around? Stop. Because again, it did 13 states, and what they found, Alabama spent. That's not going to really help.
Well, now I'm interested.
You want me to copy and paste the link on there?
Yeah, go ahead. And while he's
Copy.
trying to do that, my viewpoint is it should be treated similarly to a job. What you do in your free time is your own business. Only get drug tested if an accident occurs or you are a driver, like Kurt was saying.
So
Okay, and that's fair. And
Florida.
sorry, I'm just looking up some stats on this.
No, Florida was the most recent one.
Mhm.
They passed after it became so. Drug testing was required nationally for TANF and SNAP. It went away. They undid it, and then Florida put it back in place. And so they found out of the 4,086 people they drug tested, only 108 failed. And then if I keep scrolling down, it'll tell me how much. 2.6% failed. They spent $118,140 to reimburse people at an average cost of $35 a screening. They lost $45,780 drug testing for absolutely no reason. So again, if you look at it from a spending perspective, every state that has done this loses money. It is a losing perspective. So if you want the government to not waste money, you are effectively wasting money by screening out about 3%
How
of the
do they get
population.
a
Hold on, I
quantitative
think your
number here?
argument-
Because a lot of these people that are going into these programs, I hate to say it because it's supposed to be a safety net. They use it to catch them and stay there. They don't get off the program. So how do you get a quantity of the amount of money that'd be going towards them whenever you don't know how long they're going to choose the system? It's supposed to be what, 3 to 6 years, but it's really not.
Well, they have to be regularly drug tested, right? According to the Florida program, every
year.
Okay, so we're talking a year at a time for within their program, and that's the money that they're talking about, the $45,000.
Correct.
My only concern with that argument is there is a significant statistical hole there, in that if you know there is a drug requirement, and you know that if you drug testing requirement, you know that if there's drugs in your system, you're going to fail.
Mhm.
Somehow there were 108 people that were dumb enough to still go take the drug test and fail the drug test. My mind always gets blown when someone fails the drug test, like when they know there's one coming and then they fail the drug test. Like you knew that was coming.
Random tests.
I think it's kind of obvious. Like if you had to do that. But I would argue that there's probably plenty of people that either took themselves off the drugs or stopped taking it, or at least took a break for a period before they went and applied so that they would pass. Or simply didn't apply at all because they knew they wouldn't meet that requirement, because that requirement's in place, right? If you know, it's human nature, if you know what the certain rules X, Y, or Z, like if I don't have items 1, 2, and 3 lined up, they're just going to turn me away. Like why even go apply if you know that you're going to fail, right? A lot of people just won't because that requirement's in place. So I feel like that's a bit of a fallacy in that statistical argument. I think the argument shows a lot of good data. And if they didn't tell people, if they told people, hey, we're going to give it to you whether or not you pass the drug test, we just want the data, and then say, okay, if we had enforced this, then we would have saved X amount of money. I'd like to see that as a comparison instead. I think that'd be probably a more accurate analysis.
Again, you're then going to be going into wasting of money because you then have to drug test everyone still, and you're using it for literally no purpose because you're not going to be stopping
for data generation to see if it would save you money.
The other thing with that is if you're going to be drug testing people and it's not required, you want to do it for data, no one's going to do that. I shouldn't say no one. That's inclusive. I'm sure there will be a few, but it will not be a majority. It probably won't even be half. I would argue it would be under 20% would be doing that.
I'm sorry. If I'm designing a perfect test case for the sake of data, I would just say, hey, everybody that wants it, you have to get drug tested. We don't care if you pass or fail. We just want the data. You still have to get drug tested if you want it. Everybody's still. If we tell you, hey, it doesn't matter. We just want to know.
Yeah, I don't see that passing a court.
I don't see that passing a court either. But if I went out and just randomly said, hey, I'll give everybody $1,000 a month if you fill out the same forms and you take a drug test. If I was running it, if I was a billionaire, was king for a day, whatever you want to call it.
Could do that because it's privately funded and you have
correct,
the right
versus government funded.
Correct.
I get
funding.
But I'm saying there's a statistical problem with the model being used in that argument.
But with the numbers we can have, because it's impossible to do the scenario you want.
Okay.
So with the numbers we have, what we can grab, it is fiscally irresponsible to drug test. You will consistently pay more than what you save. And if the goal is to save money by not having people on drugs, then you're consistently not going to get there. You did bring up a very good point with the illegal drugs. I'm glad you guys are okay with if it's legal in your state. It's fine because, again, 38 states legalized marijuana. However, it is still illegal federally, which you mentioned a job hiring people for that. It's still illegal federally. So if you test, private companies can fire you because you are technically taking an illicit substance on a federal level. And that's why a lot of places that were like, if you work for the federal government, even if you live in California, but work for the federal government, if you're drug tested and you test positive for marijuana, you can be terminated because you are a federal employee, and federally it is illegal, even if it's legal in your state. So there's a lot of issues with that because, again, you're tying up money, even if it's going out state by state, it's funded federally. Right, TANF is a federal program, so federal money is tied into that. So it's hard to pull out specific drugs for different states.
That's fair. And just something you brought up is that you mentioned earlier that a small percentage of not every company requires drug testing, right?
Right.
And so that actually sparked me into doing some reading through American addiction centers. According to American addiction centers, approximately 2% of companies nationwide require drug testing.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it's a lot smaller percentage than I thought. Now, every job I have worked in the last 11 years has required drug testing. Here in California is where I live, California. But for the last 7 years, I've worked construction industry, where we're operating company vehicles, we're using power tools, we're doing those kinds of things. And before that, I worked as an EMT, where I'm working to save people's lives. But even then, going back to retail, I worked at Best Buy. We had drug testing.
It is also interesting to know how many people that are on drugs and in the workforce and are functioning drug addicts. It's just because you are because you use drugs recreationally does not mean you are on the streets, homeless, stealing and robbing.
And I would even argue there are plenty of people that use drugs recreationally that are not drug addicts. They have it under control. That is something that they do for fun or whatever you want to call it. And it doesn't seriously negatively affect them. In fact, I think there's a professor in...
I actually have him as an example. His name is Carl Hart. He's a professor of psychology at Columbia University, and he uses heroin. He uses heroin recreationally.
Yeah. And he wrote a whole book about it. He wrote a whole book about how his recreational drug use makes him a better person and a better professor. I don't know. I haven't read the book. I just saw it come up. So what?
Some would argue. Go ahead, Kurt.
I don't know how that works.
I don't know. I'd have to read the book and find out.
Well, it's also really interesting depending on the drug you use, because I know a lot of people argue that microdosing psilocybin or shrooms, right, as are more commonly known, will help expand your mind and give you more insight into yourself and allow you to be a different, in their mind, a better person. I'm not saying yes or no one way or the other, but there's some compelling evidence to that as well, which is being studied in Oakland right now. And Oakland and I believe Portland is also looking at decriminalizing psilocybin specifically as well.
Yeah, that does not surprise me.
Should all be legalized.
I am.
Thank you.
I am of the opinion that unless it's killing people.
No, even then.
I think you should be.
Your choice.
I mean, yeah, that's fair. I think there's a lot of misuse that goes into that. It's hard to argue with that point of view from the perspective of people need to be responsible for themselves. And so there's definitely that part of me that's like, people just need to be responsible for themselves. At the same time, I think we still got to protect kids from substances that are going to be harmful to them.
Yeah, we'll treat it like alcohol. Kids aren't allowed to drink.
And
Just don't get it.
Tobacco.
Yeah, tobacco.
yeah, that's fair.
Tobacco is more of a gateway drug than anything
but-
else, followed closely by
If you
alcohol.
are going to put a substance into your body, no matter what it is, you need to be able to be responsible about it and take on the responsibilities caused by your choices.
Well,
that's-
then there's the
and that's
issue
part of
where
the
your
problem is
body
people-
becomes too dependent on it.
Well,
I work at a
people-
rehab center, so
Oh,
you know,
okay.
it's
Yeah, there you
not
go.
as easy as just do it whenever you are home and you want to relax. It becomes a lot of people's, it's their daily need.
So let me ask you
That's
this
their own
then:
fault.
suicide
They knew
is
they know it could happen.
currently a crime.
Mhm.
Would you guys
Depends on the
classify
state.
suicide as a crime?
Depends on the state. Suicide's
It's
not
not
a
a
crime in
crime
certain
though, but it's
states.
not a good thing.
Suicide's not a crime in certain states. If you're doing assisted suicide because you have a life-ending illness and you want to take ownership of how your life ends. So if you're in like stage 4 cancer, you're going to die in 6 months and you want to
Mhm.
commit suicide, certain states have allowed end of life decisions like that.
Mhm.
In that case, it is not illegal. So are you talking about that specifically or suicide in general? Because most suicide is a call is a cry for help. And that's why, although it is illegal, the attempted suicide is illegal. It's typically not criminalized. They usually go and get mental health
They
checkups and get
usually do.
assistance. They
I
don't
don't see
typically send them to
Why it's
jail.
illegal.
It's technically suicide. It's considered murder by certain legislations.
That's
It's considered murder. It's a homicide, but then it's ruled suicide. When it's investigated, they investigate it as a homicide until it's ruled
because they don't know for
suicide.
sure that it was suicide.
Right.
But the person that's committing suicide, they don't care that it's illegal. What are they going to
Yeah,
do?
it's not their
Charge them
problem.
afterwards?
Well, there's this old riddle. It's like, what's the only crime that once committed, you can't be prosecuted for, but if you attempt it, you can be prosecuted for if you
Right.
don't successfully commit it. And the answer was suicide.
Yeah.
But that being said, someone harming themselves could be considered a criminal act in that case. And at the same time, we have in the United States, we have a significant issue with health across the board, where we're talking about, potentially having a universal healthcare system. So someone who is taking drugs or alcohol or tobacco or is 600 pounds and has to be cut out of their doorway to get out of their own home in West Virginia, because that was definitely on the news a couple of years ago. Guy was like 600 pounds overweight, so he was like, they said overweight, so he was like almost 1,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And they literally couldn't get him out of the house. He was stuck, and they had to cut a wall down to get him out.
Yeah, I remember that.
That is a drain on the universal healthcare system. That is a drain on the society. And generally speaking, we have a lot of laws and criminal systems in place for people that are a drain on society. So would you say that those that are harming their own health by taking drugs, which not every drug does harm your body in a significant manner, but outside of if you get in an accident or things like that, but just in and of itself harming your body, do you think that those should be regulated or made illegal, or
Treat it like alcohol. If you get caught and you've got a problem, be forced into getting help.
It doesn't work.
Treat it exactly like alcohol. I know.
We see a couple different people that come into where I work at, because I'm the one that actually takes them in the door. I'm the one that drives them from their home to the facility. If it's court ordered, they're walking back out and going to Sheets and picking up another bottle or going to get whatever they need. Whereas the ones that we take in who volunteer, they're the ones who are going to halfway houses because they want the help. So court ordering doesn't work.
Interesting.
Even so, I still think that it should be legal for you to do whatever you want with your body. Just because of the way that I am. I don't believe the government should step in and stop me from doing anything that I want to do. If I want to give up some of my freedoms for them to protect me, then I don't deserve those freedoms.
So I'm gonna tie this back to guns. So you have to forgive me here.
I was trying to lead you into that.
It's okay. Far more people die every year by DUI related accidents kill far more people every year than guns do. And yet we don't see that as a public health crisis. And we don't criminalize.
MAD would disagree with you on that.
MAD?
Mothers Against
Drunk Driving? Why would they disagree with me on that?
They see it as a public health crisis. And
okay. I see what you're
saying. Constantly trying to get to advocate for it to be listed as a public health crisis and make awareness of it. So there are advocacy groups out there that do believe that. It's just in their social conscience not really there yet, because it's very common. It's also a very common occurrence that's kind of waved off. And
you can't really go off what the government thinks is a public health crisis, because
it's okay. That's fair.
I heard recently that they thought that racism was a public health crisis.
What is it? A mental health issue? Mental health illness.
That's what they call it.
There is a mental health
mental illness
in the government.
But where I was trying to tie this back to is we see the violence and the death from guns, and so we're like, oh, we'll just ban all guns. But we have far more deaths via DUI. But we're not like, oh, we'll just ban all alcohol.
They tried.
We did try that. We did try that once as a government. But we have far more deaths from that, and we're not taking the same approach. So it seems kind of
so we know the approach doesn't
an
work.
Unequal standard. Just a side thought. So my question to you there is, why apply that to alcohol and drugs and tobacco, but not guns?
So you lost me on, I'm assuming you're talking to me, or were you talking to Cryo?
I'm talking to everybody.
Okay, because you lost me, and the reason why you lost me is because, as far as I know, you can still go out and buy a gun. And Cryo, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to talk for you, but I believe he's just saying you should be able to go and buy drugs, and you should go and buy alcohol, then you should go and be able to go gamble. And if you can go and buy it,
once you reach a certain age.
Yeah, again, once you reach a certain age. So he's saying you should be able to legally purchase it. And so you can legally purchase a firearm. Why? So he's saying you should then be able to legally purchase drugs. So I'm not really following your logic there, because
that's okay. Let me take the step back then here. The argument being made by Cryo and by yourself, if I understand correctly, is that we should legalize all the drugs.
Well, real quick,
yes.
I think my reasoning for legalizing it is different than Cryo's.
Okay. What's your reasoning then?
I want to legalize all drugs, prostitution, and gambling, specifically because you can tax the shit out of it and lower taxes and everything else. And it works in Nevada. Nevada has no income tax. They have no property tax, because they have legalized gambling, and everyone goes there, and they are able to subsidize a lot of their programs through that taxation. So I am for doing it, because you get a lot of tax dollars from it.
Okay. Well, then let me my counter argument to that is, state of California tried that with marijuana, and it's been a colossal failure. 95% of all marijuana grown in California is still grown illegally, and California does not get any tax off of that.
That's because of where it's grown and how they have to go after it. So have you ever seen do you know where most of it is grown? You know where the Emerald Triangle is?
Emerald Triangle is, I don't know. I'm assuming there's a ton of it that's grown out here in the desert. So out where I live, because we have super long growing seasons, and as long as you can get water, you can actually grow many a crop per year, far more than others, because of the temperatures, and it's very easy to set up, which is why we have a ton of it grown illegally out here in Southern California.
That's not the only thing that's grown out there where you are, Zach.
Oh yeah. We have more than one RV that catches on fire spontaneously a week out here.
That was constant when I was out there.
Yes, not a problem.
Houses
Try
like
not
that.
to specify where it's at, but you know.
But when you talk, one of the biggest areas around here is the Needles, California area. They have a real big weed industry out there, and it's right on the border between California, Arizona, Nevada area, kind of way out there. But we also still see a bunch of it growing up in the mountains, up in state and national forests, because there's a natural water supply.
That's where the majority of it is actually grown. And again, it's grown in the Emerald Triangle. So the Emerald Triangle, for those that don't know, encompasses Humboldt, Trinity, and Mendocino counties along the California coast. And it has a ton of forest that is hard for planes to catch. So you can grow within the trees. There was actually, does anyone here smoke marijuana or do marijuana? So, okay, just me.
Okay.
I did a couple times. It's not for me.
It's legal in California.
So there's
I
there's a 420 magazine that's been around for
course there is.
decades, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's so abundant in that area. It's grown along the highway at this point, and there's not a lot local officials can do because depending on where it is, it's national. So you have to have the feds come in, and by the time they get in and get permission, so there's a lot of red tape that goes into it.
Oh yeah.
So, but you say it's a colossal failure because of that. However, they do legally sell it here.
They do.
And they tax it at 35%.
Correct.
And so they pull in like $10 billion or more per year in taxes from it.
Yes.
So I would not call that a colossal failure. I would say that it's working. They need to work on the distribution and the growing aspect, but the selling aspect, which is what I'm focused on, the selling aspect is working. The selling aspect is working. People are buying it. They're getting taxed on it, and that tax revenue is coming in and going into, unfortunately, California as a whole. That just fucking keeps getting funneled into for railway that's never going to get built. But that's another topic for another time.
Yeah, agreed. Central California is just getting absolutely railed over that. Haha, get it railed.
Failed infrastructures everywhere.
Exactly.
At Pittsburgh.
So when you look at the part I'm looking at, again,
Okay.
the selling of it. I'm focusing on the selling of it. Legalize it so you can sell it and tax it. That works.
I'll give you that.
The logistics of growing it, yeah, I'm not going to argue there is a lot that's grown illegally still because there's still an illegal market for it. It's primarily not in California because, again, buying in California, you can go and just buy, you can have it DoorDash to your fucking house. And the great thing about buying it from, it's great. And the great thing about buying it from a distributor
to buy it
is
legally.
So that's one of the arguments is it's more expensive to buy it, but you know exactly what you're getting. You know what strain you're getting. You know if you're getting indica or sativa, so you know what kind of high you're going to get.
Clean.
And if you're getting you also know if you're getting it clean. And you also, if you're doing edibles, you know exactly what the dosage is. They require that you put the dosage down, and that's very important because if you've never done edibles, you can get high.
But in low income scenarios, a lot of those seems to be the vast majority of low income cities, areas, households, jurisdictions still seem to be heavily purchasing in the illegal category purely because it's cheaper.
Not necessarily from what I've seen. It's not necessarily purchasing illegally. What it is California, and this is what I don't agree with, they allowed you to grow up to 12 plants in your home legally. You know how much yield you can get from 12 plants a grow season?
See, the problem is you couldn't transport any plant. You could transport one plant at a time.
It's for personal use. I get it. But that personal use doesn't have to be for just you. It can be for all your friends and family. And if your friends and family, because they watch you grow the strain, they know what it is, they want to give you money to compensate for your growing of it, right? It's not, it can be cheaper because it's your friend. It could not be cheaper. But that's a loophole that has been found. And that is when I think they should close. Again, I'm all for legalizing it, but I don't necessarily think you should be able to grow it in your house because, again, you can't tax it. And my whole thing is taxing it. I want to tax it so my property tax and my income tax can go down, my sales tax can go down because they're getting that revenue from another source.
Yeah. And the problem has purely been enforcement. In California, it costs if the sheriff department shows up and shuts down an illegal grow, like what ends up happening is the person that's typically speaking, and this is coming from our sheriff, LA County Sheriff. I'm gonna go look at his Instagram. Guy's a complete nutcase, but I love him. He just says what he's thinking. And it has been basically a significant chunk of the illegal grows here in Southern California, particularly LA County, which is the single most populous county in the entire state, and one of the largest, if not the largest, square footage wise or square miles. Cartels pretty heavily. They bring in a low level cartel member who will then just basically sit there and monitor the grow and make sure that things are doing what they're supposed to do. What they do is they buy used, beat up trailers. They will park them on a couple of acres of empty desert. We have found that they are actually renting or stealing water trucks and then hooking those water trucks up to the city supply of fire hydrants and then taking them out to the grows, using those for water. And then when the sheriff's department shows up and shuts them down, they've already gotten several grows. They've already made quite a bit of money. The person that gets arrested is a low-level gang member who goes to prison, and they don't care. And 2 days later, there's another one that pops up. They've been monitoring this with helicopters. They hit supposedly 1,800 illegal grows in one weekend. And then supposedly within a month, there were more than 2,000 new ones that popped up in the same geographic area. So we're playing a game of whack-a-mole.
But we still have a need and a want and a desire for legal weed. So I'm not sure why you wouldn't just, if your argument is that making it illegal isn't working because it's still growing up. So why would you want to continue making it illegal? Just make it legal,
No,
which they
making
did.
it. Then here's what the problem. We didn't have this problem until we made it legal.
Wait.
There's still. So
Wait.
hold on. Hear me out. It wasn't as bad. And I say it's not. So hear me out. There the stigma of every grow you used to see was illegal, and they would hide it. Now they do it right next to the main highway out here, and nobody can argue with them otherwise, because they show up and unless it's the sheriff's department who knows if they have a permit or not. I can't just look up a random address and know if they have a legal weed permit, and I'm not allowed to go onto their property to find out if they're growing weed illegally and report them for an illegal weed grow. So the sheriff's department has a really hard time enforcing any of it without getting a warrant and doing a ton of research. And it's very, in the current way it's all set up, it's very hard for them financially, and it's actually become a financial drain on our sheriff's department to enforce the legalization of marijuana grows within Southern California.
Kurt, you got anything? You got any input on that?
I'm just kind of laughing at this.
So to me, that seems like a mismanagement on the sheriff's And here's the reason why. No, follow me on this. You to grow on large quantities, right? You have to get a permit. You can have a marijuana farm in California,
yes,
growing for the distinct purpose of distribution. That is legal, but you have to zone it and you have to have a permit for it, right?
Correct.
That is kept on file, right?
Yes.
So if you know where all of those areas are and there's marijuana being grown outside that area, where's the fucking problem?
So how do I prove? Here's the thing. How do I prove that greenhouse that popped up randomly out in the desert is growing marijuana illegally without a warrant to go into the property?
He could just be growing his tomatoes out there.
Well, here's the thing.
That's the point. They have this little greenhouse, and we have no way to prove what they're growing. And I say this because my parents happen to live out in the desert, and multiple of these have popped up near their house. And we've been talking with the sheriff's department repeatedly. They're like, "Yeah, sorry, we can't really do anything right now because we can't prove it, because you can't see inside their property. You can't see any illegally grown weed plants."
Okay, so that's changing, because you originally said they were growing it out in the open, and if you're growing out in the open, you can see it. And if you
up in Northern California, it is being grown out in the open. And here in Southern California, they will throw down a fifth wheel trailer. They will pop up a little white plastic greenhouse, and they will a couple of rows of weed plants in there, and then they'll pop up 3 or 4 of those greenhouses and grow until the sheriff's department shows up, as they finally got a warrant or they finally got some sort of justification for it.
Okay.
And shut it down. And that's the majority of the illegally grown weed here in Southern California.
And I would argue that it's not in near competition to what's legally grown and being sold in California. I would argue that it's not being sold in California. It's being shipped and sold other places where it's still illegal.
That's fair. You're probably correct on that. You're probably correct in that majority of it being sold out of state and other markets where it's illegal, but it's easier to grow here because the stigma is gone. And people don't automatically assume now that every single person carrying weed or growing weed is doing it illegally.
But I'm still also not following you, because you said they pop up a greenhouse. And why would you automatically assume someone who's into gardening is growing weed? Right.
You can smell it. You can smell it a mile away.
Yeah.
They show up, and then like the next, because it's plain desert and it's windy. It's like, I didn't smell weed, and then you guys popped up a month ago, and now all of a sudden every evening I get a light breeze coming this way, I smell weed. Like,
okay. Yeah, it's pretty bad out there in the desert.
Yeah, you can smell. I can smell when the wind's blowing the other direction. I can smell the cow farm that's a mile away. And so when I get the wind from the other direction, we can smell the weed.
So again, on that, if it's private property and they have a certain, if they're within that certain number, then it's perfectly legal.
Correct.
So-
But it has been proven by our sheriff's department that they're not, because they did come out and they hit that one.
And then they need to do what they need to do to bust it. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy.
I'm just saying that that's costing the state a lot of money, and it's actually far outweighed the money we've gotten in from the taxes in the enforcement side of the business. And that's where we're having an issue, is that because there's so much of it being grown illegally, and the enforcement of that is costing our sheriff's department millions upon millions of dollars, of which they're not getting that back in funding from the taxes that we were supposedly going to get. We've now, the sheriff's department has less money. Now, it doesn't help that we've had additional issues in funding because the board of supervisors is a huge pain. But the point being, we're not getting what, if we realistically were getting all of the funds that we thought, or we were told we were going to get by legalizing marijuana and selling it all legally, and that money was actually being put into enforcement of the laws and the regulations like they said it was going to be.
Well, no, they didn't say it was going to go only for laws and regulations towards enforcing illegal weed. It was supposed to go to a myriad of things.
Not all of it. I get that all of it wasn't,
And-
but they did say that the legalization of it would pay for all of the enforcement costs, which it
And-
absolutely has not.
I would argue that I'm still not sure why they would continuously spend that much time. So if they're doing so many things illegally on top of growing, they're stealing trucks, they're stealing water.
Mhm.
It's, again, I'm not a detective, but it
Yeah.
seems like that would be easier to track and catch than figuring out how to encroach private property,
Mhm.
which I think we agree on, that we shouldn't
100%.
allow people to walk on our
Yeah,
private property.
Fourth Amendment is very important.
So I would say, why not focus on that aspect of it?
And
if it
they,
leads
and they
you
have
to
been, and
that,
that's how they have gotten, but the problem is finding that truck on the property at the exact time has
Yeah.
been difficult.
I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm
Yep.
not saying it's going to be easy. I'm just saying, like, that would,
Yep.
to me, seem to be
And
the simple
in
solution.
some scenarios, like the one near my parents' house, they had a well, so they didn't have to steal water. They had a well.
Mhm.
So it doesn't
And-
even apply in necessarily every scenario. It was just
No.
one of the scenarios that was happening.
Again, I'm
You can
not,
smell it. Wouldn't that give you enough just cause to go search?
Nope,
no,
I've asked.
and you
It
can,
is not.
Yeah.
it is not necessarily, and you can cover the smell. It's really not that hard. Just need to get a carbon
Mhm.
filter,
Yeah.
and it'll filter out 98% of the fucking fumes. So,
Which in most cases, it doesn't matter because you're so far out in the desert and you got nobody around you and nobody cares, right? It just, my parents happen to be, half mile away
Yeah.
downwind, and it's been annoying them, which is kind of how we came to discover what was going on there.
All right. So
That
An
went
hour
down
in
a
now.
rabbit trail.
it did,
Um,
because I still don't see why we would want to not legalize it, because again, we did. I still think we should tax it, but I also agree with taxing prostitution and gambling as well, because again, you can get a ton of revenue from that.
Yeah,
And when you get
I do see what you're
from
saying.
that, you can reduce costs, because no one likes paying property taxes. Our property taxes in California, surprisingly, are rather low compared to other states. Our housing costs are through the roof, but comparatively, our property taxes are fairly low.
Mhm.
I'd like to keep that low or go down to zero, because we look at Nevada and it's zero. That's super nice, because again, most of their funding comes from gambling,
Yeah.
prostitution. And if we could add that to our legalization of drugs, we could get a lot of tax revenue and lower taxes from somewhere else. So we're still
So
break even.
if every state were to suddenly legalize all of those things,
Mhm.
what do you think would happen in Nevada?
Oh, Nevada probably fucked, but I don't live in
Yeah.
Nevada, so just throwing that out there right now. Because
the only reason it makes so much is because it's the only place you can go. I mean, there's places
That in New
here and there,
Jersey,
like
but
in
who wants to go to New
Tennessee,
Jersey, right?
Right.
One here in Ohio.
like
Mhm.
so even in California, right? Like I really want in like I don't know one wants to do it because Sacramento's like our capital, right?
Mhm.
But right around the middle of the state, right? Just right around the middle of the state, create a haven where you have legalized prostitution and gambling of all types there. Because you know how many people come from Washington, Oregon, and Northern California all the way through the state to get to Nevada to go to Vegas? You could intercept all of those. That's quite a bit and get a ton of revenue.
What
Now
would you
Vegas will
call
still
this
have a
place?
I don't know. I'm not going to call it New Vegas. I'm not going to be.
Well, it's just for
no.
prostitution. So
No. I
Would
said
that be the
prostitution and
California
gambling.
thing?
I said gambling and prostitution, right? Because they have legalized prostitution in around Las Vegas, and they have legalized gambling in Vegas. I want the same thing here. I don't know what the hell they want to call the project. They can call it whatever they want. I'm just saying a lot of locals in Washington, Oregon, and Northern California would then go there instead of needing to all the way to Vegas. Vegas, I don't think would specifically hurt that much. Lake Tahoe and Reno would probably see a lot of hurt. But Vegas specifically is so iconic now with like the hangover, throwing it out there, and so many international people flying to Vegas to have that experience. They would probably see a drop off, but I don't think it would be significant enough to actually make that big of a difference, because Vegas has already set itself up. Again, Reno might see a big dip, and Tahoe probably would. But I think California would see a large boon in tax revenue from it if we tax it again at 35% like we did for marijuana.
All right.
Okay.
Well, let's get to closing arguments then.
Oh yeah, back to
I can't say that I have a significant coming back here. I think that's all very interesting. I don't know that I have the numbers to have an actual argument with you on that right now, but maybe in the future I'd like to revisit that discussion. But coming back to our original topic of
that was a way around.
That was a real way around. I
mean, it dealt with drugs, so it was
drug testing
on topic.
It's all drug testing. Yeah, it's all on topic.
Right.
Drug testing for.
I have something to add to yours after you're done too.
Okay,
on the work part. So
I'm still shocked that only 2% of jobs require drug testing. So I do think that that's kind of, I don't know, it's making drug testing almost moot at this point, right? Because the primary argument there is the majority of society is not high 24/7, and their jobs require that. They require that they show up to work sober and not high, or however you want to call that, same difference. But it seems to not be the case. So I don't know where that leaves my argument there, from the perspective of
that drug testing. Is that only for onboarding, or is that for like repeated drug testing, or how did they like? We gotta have information on that though.
For welfare, or
I think there was
job?
No, for having a job, only 2%.
These are all pre-employment drug testing.
So
yeah,
that doesn't really, because what my job did is before I even, I guess, went for my drug test, they told me I was hired, but I have to pass a drug test. If I fail it, then they're immediately firing me. So you have to look up post-employment or during employment drug testing too, not just pre-employment. Again, lots of places you have to be employed before they'll even drug test you.
So while you look that up, you mentioned about
I've never had that. Every job I've gone to that's done drug testing, I got employment after verification.
Right. So for me, I got
day is after verification, but they tell you that you're hired, you have to go get drug tested, and then
for, at least for us, that's still considered pre-employment drug testing, because your offer is a contingent offer, contingent on you passing a background check, passing a drug test, and making sure you have a clean driving record. So
for us, it's considered part of your onboarding, like you're learning your job part.
Okay. Interesting.
I mean, mine most of them, because I've gotten a lot of my jobs through temp services, because I work in electronics, but I mean, I haven't in the past few years, but the last 5 or 6 jobs before my current one, I was through a temp service. So they always did the drug testing when I applied at the temp service.
Yeah.
And I had to do a drug test before every time they would put me into a job.
Last 3 times I had to go for drug testing, I would leave my place of employment after, interview, all that, shake the guy's hand. He'd say, "You're hired, go get your drug test done." That's how they do it. You can start at your first day working here will be after you're drug tested, but we already shake hands and say you're hired.
Yeah.
So according to Forbes, it's 0.6%. We could even round that up to 1, and it totals 3.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it looks like regular drug screening within jobs is less than 1% in the US.
So
which is fascinating.
Again, drug screening while you're at work, random drug tests like that.
Well, I think part of that is the particular fields that people work that require it. Some require it more than others, like government jobs, healthcare, hospitals, manufacturing, automotive, private security, aerospace, construction jobs are like the top end of they constantly require drug screenings. And at the bottom end, you have customer service, human resources,
those
sales,
those jobs, the job being a drug tester is all
retail.
depending on what the government regulates. And
Right.
then
And,
to the
and so a lot of
influence
these,
the company to do the drug testing, because my wife, she's in diesel mechanic.
Mhm.
They do random drug tests all the time. And when I say random, it's she was randomly chosen every time because they know she doesn't do anything.
That's how most places will do it.
Our random was, you were in an accident, you were randomly chosen to go get tested. But when you look at the percentage of jobs that are that people fill, we talk about service jobs, right? Service and retail. You got food service, things like that. Those are all at the bottom end of the list for percentage of companies that require drug testing, even though they make up the largest percentage of jobs in the U.S. So I think that's a fascinating. I honestly didn't know that before this episode, so thank you for bringing that up. That's pretty interesting. So my closing argument is I think my argument is a moot point because majority of companies aren't even requiring it anymore as a job requirement. So it's kind of hard to argue that we should hold people to a standard that we aren't ourselves being held to.
What do you guys think would be a middle ground that we could, since we're both on opposite ends, me and Neil being on the one side and you, Zach, and Kurt being on the other, what would be a middle ground we can agree on?
I mean, people just have jobs and don't need welfare.
Yeah. Go get a job. Everywhere's hiring.
So no, thank you for that segue. That is
There
a
you go.
perfect segue.
I knew it was going to help you.
What I wanted to bring up. Did you know that 87% of people that are on SNAP food benefits are employed? 87%.
Yeah, but they're employed at working minimum wage jobs. When minimum wage jobs as either single parents or single adults that either may or may not have roommates, but they meet the minimum requirements to receive welfare.
And in this, I'm specifically talking about SNAPs or food assistance, right?
Okay, specifically those. And they work a full-time minimum wage job or two, but I'll say when I was young and newly married and had a kid and worked two jobs, there was a 4-month period of time where we needed SNAP assistance. We actually ended up just using, we didn't actually end up using any of it that we applied for. All we wanted was the WIC, women, infant, and children, which is basically just like bread and cheese and milk. And just some really basic staples. We did that for a couple of months when we were hurting after we had a car breakdown, just to kind of get things paid for so I could continue getting to work. But this was a dozen years ago, I guess, at this point. But I still had, I had 2 full-time jobs. And still, because things were tight, and I understand how it's needed and should be there and available as a temporary support for people.
Yep.
I do still view this as it should be a temporary support system. And it's truly sad that people can have a full-time job and still not be able to pay their bills. It's a frustrating point that we're at, I think, in society where that is the case, where I would argue everybody in the household that can work is working, and that's not enough. I feel like we should be at least be able to hit a baseline minimum with everybody working, where you can live, you can pay your rent, buy your food. I think what we consider as a bare minimum standard of living in the United States is probably a little skewed, because we probably see having a cell phone and having internet and Netflix as being a bare minimum these days, versus food and water and shelter being the bare minimum. So
real quick, to qualify for SNAP,
yeah,
right, you need to have there's a thing called categorical eligibility. So your income, your gross income, needs to be under 200% of the federal poverty limit. Okay.
What's the federal poverty limit?
Well, that's a great question. I didn't actually look that part up. For a household of one annually, looks like it's $30,000, $30,578. That's 220. That's 225%. That's wrong. Hold on.
Geez, they go all the way up to for a family of 9+.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Right.
Got 9+ kids. You need to like find a hobby.
That is their hobby.
I think they
Making
found
the
one.
kids. I don't know. That's a pretty fun hobby.
So it looks like for like a household of 4, it'd be 26,500. So double that annually.
That's how much you would have to make less than that.
Yeah, annually.
Less than double of the poverty level.
Yeah. Again,
So
that's-
less than $53,000 a year, you are
Correct.
eligible for food stamps. That seems ridiculously high.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
there are a lot of people that are currently on it. As far as
That
what
doesn't-
expenses are used, they allow rent or mortgage, and then they allow like PG&E, water, sewer, garbage, stuff like that. Because that's something that's required to live. If you don't pay those, then you can use a phone bill instead of that.
So to be clear, if I work a full-time job and I work 40 hours a week and I make, and I'm supporting a family of 4, I make less than $27 an hour, I would qualify for that. $27 an hour times 40 hours a week times 52 weeks a year.
I wonder if they're counting there being like 2 incomes to the household.
$53,000.
Holy crap.
So potentially, but
Mhm.
again, when you're doing the budget, you have to factor in what deductions are allowable, and there's maximum deductions you can get per line. So although you may qualify for the minimum amount of $20.
Okay, fair enough. Because
$20
probably the more you
$20.
make, the more you would
More
qualify
make,
for. But
the
they're
less you
basically
qualify
saying,
for.
that you are eligible for this up until the point you're making $27. Now, what was the single person?
Single person is 16,090.
Where are you getting this from?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm on aspe.hhs, health and human services.gov. Let me copy that. Are you have something different? Brian?
I'm on healthcare.gov, and for individuals, I got 13,590 for 2022.
Maybe it's probably that one then. I'm using the Health and Human Services, but I think I'm doing poverty guidelines thresholds.
So for a single person, that breaks out to about $15.50 an hour.
Mine's older, so yeah.
Okay. So yeah, they probably updated to account for 8% inflation. So $15.50 an hour.
Okay.
Is that if you're as a single person, you're making less than that, you qualify for food stamps. Well, not food. I'm sorry. This is probably not the right word to use anymore. It's SNAP. Okay. We'll call it SNAP.
Live on $15.50 an hour as a single person, you're doing something wrong. Because
Depends on
that's
the state
about
you live in.
what the wife and I made when we first got together.
I lived off of it. I lived off $10 an hour here in California.
And that was a long time ago. Currently, our minimum wage is $15 an hour. So that's
Correct.
the minimum you're going to
Which
get.
I was making minimum wage at the time, 12
again,
years ago.
My mother raised me at like 13 or 12. So
And again, if you qualify, you're not qualifying for the maximum. You'll be qualifying for something
Which is-
potentially.
okay.
Because
okay,
there's still
that's
a
fair.
net test. And if you fail the net test, you don't qualify, right? This is just the baseline to not deny your application at the gate.
I think that baseline number probably needs to be lowered.
It did recently increase. It was 130%. It recently increased to 200%.
Okay, that's where there's probably a disagreement there. Okay. How did we got off onto this tangent? I don't remember what we were talking about.
Because 87% of people that get this are already employed. So you were saying that
Okay.
one of the contingencies of being on aid is to be employed, but 87% of them already are employed.
Fantastic. I'm glad
so
that would be the
Your
case.
requirement has already been met.
Fantastic.
I'm still just
Let's
upset
keep
about, like I can walk through my town and over half the people here, no job, living off the government, and they've been doing it for like 10, 20 years. Where's
What government though? Because we haven't talked about Social Security. We're not even lumping Social Security into that.
Oh no,
Right.
I'm talking like they're like
So-
20, 30 something year olds who can go get a job but choose not to.
and you can still get Social Security depending on your disability if you have a disability and you qualify.
They're not.
Well, not all disabilities are physical, right? Not all disabilities are something you can see.
Oh no, it's
So
We know
you
a
can
couple
talk
people
to
that
them,
have
look at them.
mental
It's not a mental
Yeah, right
disability.
what was that, Cryo?
No, I'm just talking shit. You can ignore me.
I think there's a large. I think it's kind of like the handicap space. There's probably you people get upset when they see someone hop out of a handicap spot with handicap placard that doesn't look like they're handicapped and walk into the store. I think there's probably plenty of people who we see them and we don't think that they should be on the system, but they are, and they probably have a legitimate reason. And there's also probably plenty of cases that justify our reasoning, but there's probably not as many as we think. And that's the thing about human perception. We always assume that the percentages of people that are doing something illegally or doing something against the rules is a larger percentage than it is of people that are really doing it, just purely because that's human nature, which is why I like to go to the numbers when we can. And we don't have a whole lot of numbers, at least not that I'm aware of, that show, who's cheating the system here. Because obviously if we knew who was cheating the system, we'd cut them off from it, right?
Do surprisingly, and around the average is 11%. 11% of people
11% have been caught. Not 11% of people are.
Will have committed some type of fraud, and it is extremely hard to commit a type of fraud, considering all of the agencies that work together to make sure that everyone is reporting everything correctly. You may not get caught initially, but you will eventually get caught. And when you are eventually caught, you are prosecuted for felony and you do jail time. And again, it's around 11%. It's the reason I bring that number up is because most people feel, right? I feel it's over 30%, and it's really not. It's 11%, which I would argue is still high. I do think that's still a high number. It's double digits, but it's not nearly the number people believe. So when you think about
perception,
exactly. So when you think about it, 11% sounds like a lot, but when there's 100 million people on aid, 11% of 11 million of 100 million isn't really that much.
I mean, it's still 11 million people,
right? Yeah, but it's also accounting for 90 something million or 80 something million, right? 89 million. My math isn't
correct. The whole program shouldn't be shut down just for the 90 million, because the 11 million we're messing up, right?
Exactly.
That it's like the teacher punishing the whole class because one student did something stupid. Exactly. It doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense to punish the whole. Doesn't mean we can't make updates to the system that make it more effective, so that the people who really need it get what they deserve, or get not even what they deserve, get what they need. That sounds terrible when I say get what they deserve.
I'm glad you corrected it.
But get what they need. Because at the end of the day, the whole point of this is to make sure that people stay healthy and can survive. And as a society, we try to take care of others. Doesn't mean we have to all have the same equal income all the time. But that's a whole other conversation for another day. Huh?
Yeah, let's not try and get sidetracked on another subject.
Okay. All right. I'll cut it off.
We're going on an hour and a half now.
All right. I'll shut up.
We don't want another 3-hour episode.
I'm curious though, because because at the beginning we were talking about, should people have to drug test and have a work program to get aid? And again, 87% are already working, and there is currently a work program in place. It's called Welfare to Work, right? And drug testing isn't widely spread amongst private employers, and it's not cost efficient for governments to do it. So are we thusly in an agreement that we should probably not do it?
What, not have welfare programs or not drug test?
Not drug test.
I'm based on what you're showing me here, and what I'm just reading, my feelings previously, and again, feelings were that we should drug test. I would argue that it's probably not necessary, at least in the current state that the U.S. is in. I would argue that might change in the future. It may have been more effective in the past, but with current most companies not even making it a job requirement as it is, that's a double standard, right? If majority of 98% of those working in the US don't have to do it, why does the other, well, I can't say it's 98% because what is it? We have a 10% unemployment rate right now.
Well, by state or by nation, yeah.
Nationwide.
And that's only currently receiving unemployment benefits, not the unemployed that aren't reported because they're not collecting anything.
Right. So then we're saying that 90, so that would be like 89% of those in the US are currently not being required to drug test for their employment. Then that would mean that we're going to set a different standard for the other 11%. Doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense.
And it's even higher than 11% because, again, a lot of those people that are working full time are also on aid. So
right, but they're not considered unemployed, right?
No,
okay.
Because they are full time employed,
right,
or at least part time employed,
right. So for them, that would set for that 11%. We're basically setting a separate standard for them, saying, "Hey, yeah, we know your current job doesn't require that you get drug tested, but we're still going to make you get drug tested." Doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And I understand, like I see that the program existing previously, again, with previous standards, when probably those programs were written, I would argue that probably a lot more government or a lot more companies required drug testing, but it does not seem to be the case now. Again, that's down to 2% of employers in the US.
All right. What about you, Kurt?
I'm still like, I'm middle zoned here because like I see your data. I understand your points here. But it's still the fact of they're unemployed. They're not getting up and heading to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, whatever.
Well, 87%
work a
of them
full-time
are.
job.
87% of them are working.
Well, hold on. 87% of them have a job or are full-time employed working 40 hours a week.
You bring up the numbers again.
I'm saying the ones who are completely unemployed, not working, should do something to receive benefits. Whether it be just go for your drug test or put in certain amount of community service hours every week. One of those two would work.
So you think a job requirement or drug testing requirement?
Yes.
Ooh, either or, not both. Interesting.
Yeah.
That could work.
Because it's going to stop Mr. Smith from sitting down the street just getting high all day because he doesn't want to work and he doesn't want to do anything but get high. So I've brought a lot of those in.
Do you want to add alcohol to that? You can't have blood alcohol content or fail other drug testing. So we're saying, hey, you can't have any fun until you get a job.
Yeah. If you're not doing something for the community to put your part in, you can't enjoy what we get, what we get to enjoy.
But the drug test gets waived if you have a job.
Yes. Or you put in your community service hours. For
Interesting.
Sorry.
That month or so.
Can you explain why I was reading? So real quick, the numbers don't say if they're full-time employed or part-time employed, just that they're employed.
Just employed. Okay.
Looking employed. So why are you saying that they would have to either drug test or work? Can you tell it to me again?
He's saying do one or the other, not both.
To put in your fair share.
Okay, but what do you consider a fair share? I'm sorry, I'm not getting
salt and taxed.
But
or putting so that we know that you're not just sitting home getting high or getting drunk.
Anytime you buy something, you're paying sales tax, so you're paying in.
True, but it's not coming out your paycheck.
About when people,
you're not.
But hold on, they're only buying stuff off of their unemployment benefits.
Yeah,
which they paid into and have the right to.
How many?
Huh?
I would argue that the majority of people,
a lot of people.
A majority of the people that are on that system have not paid more into the system than they have used.
Okay, do you have the numbers to back that up? Because I have a feeling.
I don't. That's a feeling.
A feeling, not a fact. Because most times when 100%. We have a feeling, they don't.
That is definitely just a feeling.
I 100% would say that's a feeling.
But why? Because again, they did a study, right, of people that were currently on aid in Florida. It was done by university, and they interviewed 500 people that were on aid.
500 people.
80% of the people that were on aid believed that most people on aid, 75% or more, did not need it, did not deserve it. These are people on aid themselves, right? Fun fact, that translates to a lot of people who aren't on aid as well, right? A lot of people who are not on aid believe most people on aid do not need the assistance. They're gaming the system, for lack of a better term, right? And
that's the truth.
it's not the truth though. It's what it boils down to. It's not the
The
truth.
majority of people aren't.
You do not live a great life on aid. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have luxuries when you're on aid. It's not like you're living the high life eating caviar and steaks all day. So to say that most people don't deserve it or need to pay their fair share and that they haven't paid their fair share is a feeling, but it's not actually a fact.
But if you're still receiving, you have to like give back a little bit, you know? Okay, you paid into it, but you're still receiving it.
Yeah, but the majority of people that go on aid,
bit.
the majority of people that go on aid, again, if we're talking about food stamps specifically, they were working and are still currently working. They either
we're not counting them in though. We're counting in the people who are doing nothing.
And most people that were doing nothing, were doing something before, need the help to get back on and on aid for an average of 2.5 years, and then get back on to something that takes them off. Because the qualifications to get on are a lot stricter than the qualifications to get off. So once you get off, there's different tests, and you can stay on for a long time. And there's things to put in place to help you to stay on aid while your income increases, to make sure you don't go back on aid in the previous time. So again, it's a feeling, but it's not actually the majority of people that are on aid. It's actually the minority of people that are on aid.
It is a minority of people that are well, we can say there's a minority of people on it. I'm interested. I just pulled up some census.gov information on how long people who receive assistance stay on assistance. And the looking at TANF, the average time is 62.9 months.
Just over 5 years.
Just over 5 years on average.
But is that consecutive or is that broken up?
That is
what is the average age of the person on this?
Percentage of non-institutionalized civilian population participating in one or more major means tested programs or specified months. It's accumulated months.
Exactly.
Within which the period they went for was January 2009 through December 2012. So of those surveyed in that time frame, in that 3-year time frame, the average participant length was 62.9 months.
Just over 5 years. And again, TANF is for families, which means you have to have a child under the age of 18. So this is the span of, if you only have one child within that child's 18-year lifetime, you are using on average just over 5 years.
So which okay. That's
the reason I'm saying that also is because,
which means that they're not getting off of it quickly. The program isn't fixing the problem.
What could be happening, again, without digging more into these individuals, they could be getting on it for a year or two, getting off, and then having a life event and getting back on. Because again, you have an 18-year
That's
span.
just too convenient.
No, hear me out. 62.9 months lines up with your infant going to kindergarten.
Yeah.
When they can then go back to work because your child is at school that day during the day, and so now you don't have to pay for childcare.
That too.
That would make a logical jump. I understand that's a jump, and that's not sitting here within the data what they showed me here.
No, but that is because it's 0 to 5, right? 0 to 5. Most kids go to school between the ages of 5 and 6.
Right. Makes sense. Anyways, I'll link you guys to the website so you can do the reading, not on the podcast, because otherwise we'll be here all day. But I think we should probably cut it off there.
So, Neil, you have anything left over to close out? Because I mean, you've been talking the whole time.
Man, I'm sorry, but yeah, no, I had. I'm glad I was able to. I don't want to say sway, but at least have Zach consider a different perspective and maybe.
I'm always willing to consider a different perspective. I just think you're usually wrong.
Which is
that's the thing. You can only say he's wrong though when he's not.
Because I showed up this week.
But to be fair, I wasn't wrong. I wasn't necessarily wrong this time though, either.
Yeah, that's.
And I wasn't necessarily wrong this time, which is great.
That's fair.
So I'm happy with that.
You can take the win this week.
All right. Kurt,
what?
Closing statements?
Oh, we already. That's
I already did mine.
He already had it. I cut him off. I talked right over him.
Or closing statement.
That's fine.
I really didn't get a word in on the closing statement, but yeah, sure, let's go with that.
I talked right over him and just hijacked his point of view.
That's usually how.
No, I like you hijacking my views. I just say something controversial, and Zach's just here like firing it away. I like it.
That's usually how it is. Neil and Zach are talkers. So.
Oh no! Why would you say that about me? Never.
So, well, let's go ahead and close it out, guys.
All right.
Thanks for joining
Good
us.
times, guys.